she was the music icon who became one of the best-selling artists of the century. But throughout fame, fortune and tragedy, there was one friend who never left Amy Winehouse's side.
Well, after meeting at stage school when they were just 12 and 13, Amy and Tyler James quickly became the best of friends and remained inseparable until her tragic death in 2011.
And as we approach the 10th anniversary of Amy's death, Tyler is now sharing their story of friendship in his book, which is called My Amy. Good morning, it's lovely to have you here. There's the book that we're talking about, and this really is your story, and it's a story of friendship, and it's one that has not been easy for you to write, because I imagine it's a book that people have been asking for a long time, but it had to be at a time that felt right for you.
Well, it's taken me, it's taken about 4 years to write it.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows this, but grief is a very complicated process. And, you know, at first for me, I just tried to cope, like, without her. And after about 5 years, you know, I realised I was just coping.
Yeah.
I wasn't really living anymore, you know. And I had a day, it was about 4 or 5 years ago, I was in my flat in Kensal Rise, and I woke up and I felt really angry. Then I had all these emotions, and I started crying, and I basically started writing stuff down. Amy always used to say to me, she was meticulous at writing things down, her thoughts and her emotions, and she always used to say to me, write stuff down. And the first thing I wrote, actually, was the day Amy passed away, which was really hard, and I'd never spoken to anybody about it. You know, I'd never said the things that the paramedics said to me, all of the trauma of that day. And, you know, I spent the whole day in my flat. There's still a hole in the wall when I left, where I threw something at the wall. It was really, not to be dramatic, it was a really hard day.
Yeah.
You know, and I went to bed and I felt awful. But the next day, when I got up, I felt better.
A bit lighter.
I felt better, and I was like, you know, I need to get this out. And then I just kept writing and writing and writing. And, you know, it was like 17, 18 years worth of memories of the most amazing person I've ever known in my life.
You do start the book with that tragic day when you happened to be away. You went to your folks overnight and then come back. And I don't think we need to dwell on that, because you know, there's a lot of that we sort of know, and you're very honest in the book about the things we don't know. However, there is lots that we didn't know about her, about the fact you describe her as your everything. Yeah. And so
she was my sister, my mother, my soulmate, she was my world. Like, you know, it's really hard to. I never imagined I'd be without her. I mean, lots of people would feel like that about somebody, you know, and I feel she's the other part of me, you know, and I feel like she's missing. I feel like she's with me too, you know, but.
When you first met her, I think you were at Sylvia Young's, and you were...
I was.
Were you 12, she was 12, you were 13?
She was 12, I was 13.
So, to kids...
She was about 6 inches shorter than me, so she actually looked about 9.
And yet, the moment she opened that mouth...
Yeah, well, I heard her sing before I heard her speak, which is... And she did with me. We had a singing teacher, a guy called Ray Lamb, and he was putting a tape together for his nan, to have students singing Happy Birthday. And I walked in and I did my little Stevie Wonder rendition, and there was this little Jewish girl, and she basically sang like a 60-year-old woman who smoked like 60 Marlboro Gold a day. And she sounded like, you know, Dinah Washington. And the force of this person, I just couldn't believe it. I was absolutely blown away, gobsmacked. Yeah. And, you know, it was pure, you know, she was so talented. And we just hit it off. We hit it off straight away. And through our teenage years, you know, I suffered with depression and anxiety. You know, I still do now, but I have a handle on it, you know, and she had the same thing, and it just drew us close, you know. Sometimes you meet somebody and it feels like you've met them before. Yeah. It's like, hello, like, there you are, you know. And looking at Amy, for me, was sometimes just like looking in the mirror. We were so similar, you know, so similar, in good and bad ways.
And that's the thing, because I mean, you encouraged her to get discovered, really, you know, sort of, you know, get out there, get out there. People have got to know what you can do. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, when she was in her late teens, you know, Amy was smoking a lot of weed, and she was, I would say, you know, she wasn't in a great place, but she was so talented and so creative, and she'd sit with her guitar, and it just felt obvious to me. At the time, I was already writing and stuff like that, you know, in the studio, and I begged her to make a tape, and she actually sent it eventually. It took me about 3 months of begging her to make this tape, and I played it to somebody, you know, in the record industry, and, you know, the rest is history. And it's hard, actually, because when things were really bad, because, you know, Amy hated being famous. She hated being famous. She said, you know, fame is like terminal cancer. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. She absolutely hated it. She craved normality so much. So when things were bad, I kind of felt guilty too, you know, for bringing her into that world, you know. But now I feel differently about it because she did so much, and, you know, in the time that she was here, you know, she really did make an impact, didn't she?
She really
Oh, God, yeah, she really did. I mean, her music is iconic. People still love listening to it.
She was unreal.
The person who doesn't love listening to it is you. From hearing her voice before you heard her speak. Normally, right now, we'd pepper this interview with her sound, her music in the background, and we're not doing that today because for you, it's too hard.
I hope one day I'll be able to, but if you love someone and, you know, I still miss her. It still hurts. And if you hear her voice, she comes to life. And, you know, I've had times where you know, because Amy's played everywhere, I'll walk into a shop and she's on and you'll burst into tears. And sometimes you're OK, sometimes you're not. So, you know, it's hard. It's hard.
Well, you were there when she was writing the songs that we know so well. I mean, you said she loved words and she had to get everything down first. The lyrics came first,
yes,
I think.
She was a poet.
So sitting on the kitchen floor with a glass of Jack Daniels by the side of her and she'd
on the kitchen
writing,
floor
you were there.
with, you know, pen and paper. You know, she just sort of, you know, bled onto the pages. That's what Amy was like. She put her heart into her music. She wrote about, I think this is why people love her, she wrote about her life. You know, that first album she wrote about breaking up with Blake, you know, and she just literally sat on the kitchen floor. She was nocturnal at the time. And, you know, I would be upstairs in bed and I'd hear her writing all of these songs, you know, all of them, you know, just hearing them being created and all on this guitar. And it was just her. She was just naturally gifted in that way, you know. She didn't have to think too much. It just came out of her, you know.
Something that was really important for you to have shed some clarity on was the fact that a lot of people thought towards her end of her life that she was at her worst, that she was in this grip of this addiction, but actually that wasn't the case. No,
and that's one of the main reasons I wrote the book, is I think people think with Amy it was, you know, what happened was inevitable. It was a car crash waiting to happen, and I don't think she gets enough credit. The last 3 years of Amy's life, she didn't touch drugs. You know, when I went out to her, we had a time apart for 3 months. I went to rehab, and I went to St Lucia, and I could see that she'd started to replace drugs with alcohol, and that was the battle in the last 3 years. But she was so close. She was just about to get over that hill, that same hill that I've conquered. I've been sober for 13 years.
Oh, well done, you.
You know, thank you. And you know, she was just about to get there. She'd be sober for 5 weeks, and then she'd relapse for 3 days. You know, and she looked up to me because in her eyes, I was the worst alcoholic in the world. When I was drinking, I drank 2 bottles of vodka a day, amongst other things. You know, I don't miss that at all. I really, really don't miss that life. It's horrible. You know, so she looked up to me and I helped her. We'd go through alcohol withdrawal together, and she was so close. She was running on the treadmill. She was in the gym. She was drinking green juice. She wanted to be sober. She wanted to be sober, and she was, in my eyes at the time, just about to crack it. Just about to crack it. I didn't, for the life of me, expect that to happen, you know. And just at the very end there, in the last year, I took a new tact, which was whenever she relapsed, I'd leave. Because I lived with her whole life from the moment, you know, from when we were about 18. So I used to leave so that because I was worried she'd think I was supporting her, you know, even though I, you know, said I didn't want her to drink. So I would leave, and every time I left, within 2 or 3 days, she would ring me and she would say, Tyler, come home. Come home. And I'd say, well, you know, if you're going to get sober, I'll come home. And I would come back. And the last time was just one of those times. It was just one of those times you know, I'd left. I had a massive argument with her because by this point there were letters from the doctor saying if she drank anymore that she'd die. And I came in one afternoon after going out for a walk, and she had a glass of wine in her hand, and it's really hard. And I just flipped. The last time I saw Amy, I had an argument with her. And then I came back 2.5 days later, and as I walked through the door, an ambulance turned up, and that's when everything happened. And you know, it's so surreal. It's the worst day of my life, you know.
You want to find something positive out of all of this.
I do.
I mean, you've learnt a lot for what you've been through personally yourself.
Yeah.
and the addictions that you've overcome currently. So, what do you want to do? You want to talk. You want to help.
Yeah, I do. I mean, writing the book's been incredibly cathartic, you know, and it's really helped me. It's like I've given myself therapy. I'm so pleased I've done it. It's the most amazing thing. And what I want to do now, you know, I want to use my experience as an addict and my experiences with Amy to help other people with addiction. That's what I'm really passionate about. I seem to fall upon it, even since Amy passed away. I fall upon other people like that. I'm drawn to it. I want to help people because addiction is an illness. You know, it is an illness. You know, you can want to be sober, you can really want to be sober and still not be able to do it. You know, it's such a horrible illness, and I would love to help people so people don't have to go through that. You know, I would love to be a speaker on addiction. I would love that.
Well, what you've said today, what you've written in here, that's certainly an amazing beginning, and I bet she'd be so proud of you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
without a doubt.
Thank you so
without
much.
a doubt.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, and this is the book that we've been talking about. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.